Good day, everyone. Hi, it's Elisa from Elisa Marie Designs, and it is early Saturday morning, May the 30th, and the world is very quiet, and I'm hoping, with everything crossed in my body, that it stays that way because we are about to arrive at the final chapter of My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, chapter 26. And honestly, I don't quite know where Daphne is about to leave us. That's the magic and torment of this story, I think. Maybe you agree with me. For weeks now, we've walked beside Philip through obsession and, in the beginning, suspicion. Well, maybe throughout the whole story. Longing, definite longing and devotion, manipulation, tenderness, grief, and confusion so deep that even now, at the very end, I still don't know who to trust. Rachel has remained like smoke in our hands the entire way through this novel. Impossible to fully hold on to, impossible to fully understand. And maybe that's exactly the point. I am still working on Kurtis Rykovich's Secret Heart, and I keep looking into the face on this painting and thinking about how much emotion can live behind one expression: beauty and danger. This is a face that also balances between life and death. Beauty and innocence and knowing, but there's also love and destruction. So much of those duality in emotions feels woven throughout this entire novel. And so my heart is racing a little bit with this final chapter. I am a little nervous, truly, because Daphne du Maurier does not write stories to comfort us, as so far as what I've seen. And if you didn't know, she also wrote The Birds, which kind of like lingers at the back of my mind that she wrote The Birds. She writes stories that linger, stories that crawl under our skin and stay there long after the final page has been turned. I will never forget Rebecca, or the second Mrs. De Winter, or Max. So wherever this last chapter takes us, whether we get clarity or heartbreak, maybe tragedy, or something even more unsettling if possible, I'm grateful that we're experiencing it together for the first time. This is my first time reading My Cousin Rachel. So I have my coffee, my dose. If you're working along and listening, I always have that image of you guys like, what are they doing while I'm reading? Are you working? Are you crafting? Are you diamond painting? Are you driving? Are you falling into sleep? Are you sitting on the beach? Whatever. I would, if I was listening, I have my coffee here, but I would settle in like those old radio shows, maybe even dim the lights a little bit. Pick up your diamond painting, your tea, your journal, or just simply listen like a podcast. And let's get ready to step into chapter 26, the final chapter of My Cousin Rachel. Thank you for being here. I put the envelope back in the drawer. I turned the key. I took the bunch of keys and replaced it on the dressing table. I did not look at her as she lay sleeping in her bed. I went to my room I think I was more calm than I had been for many weeks. I went to my washing stand, and standing there beside the jug and basin were the 2 bottles of medicine that the doctor had prescribed for me. I emptied the contents from the window. Then I went downstairs with a lighted candle and into the pantry. The servants had all gone to their quarters long ago. On the table near the washing sink stood the tray with the 2 cups upon it from which we had drunk our tisana. I knew that John was sometimes idle of an evening and might leave the cups till morning to be washed, as indeed he had. The dregs of the tisana lay in both the cups. I examined both of them by candlelight. They looked the same. I put my little finger into the dregs, first hers, then mine, and tasted. Was there a difference? It was hard to tell. It might be that the dregs from my cup were just a little thicker, but I could not swear to it. I left the pantry and went again upstairs to my room. I undressed and went to bed. As I lay there in the darkness, I was not aware of anger or of fear, only compassion. I saw her as someone not responsible for what she did, besmirched by evil, compelled and driven by the man who had power over her, lacking through fault of circumstance and birth. In some deep moral sense, she was capable by instinct and by impulse of this final act. I wanted to save her from herself, and I knew not how. It seemed to me that Ambrose was beside me, and I lived again in him, and he in me. The letter he had written, which I had torn in shreds, was now fulfilled. I believed, in her strange way, that she had loved us both, but we had become dispensable. Something other than blind emotion directed her actions after all. Perhaps she was 2 persons, torn in 2, first one having sway and then the other. I did not know. Louise would say that she had been second always, that from the very first every thought, every move, had some premeditation. In Florence with her mother, after her father died, had it started then, or even before? The way of living? Sangalletti, dying in a duel, who had never been to Ambrose or myself other than a shadow without substance. Had he suffered too? Louise, no doubt, would tell me that he had. Louise would insist that from the first encounter with Ambrose 2 years before, she planned to marry him for money. And when he did not give her what she wanted, planned his death. There was the legal mind. And she had not read the letter I had torn to shreds. What would her judgment be if she had? What a woman had done once without detection, she can do twice, and rid herself of yet another burden. Well, the letter was torn. Neither Louise nor anyone else would ever read it. The contents mattered little to me now. I did not think so much of them as of the last scrap that Ambrose wrote, dismissed by Rinaldi, and by Nick Kendall too, as being the final utterance of a brain diseased. She has done for me at last, Rachel, my torment. I was the only one to know he spoke the truth. I was back again, then, where I had been before. I had returned to the bridge beside the Arno, where I had sworn an oath. Perhaps, after all, an oath was something that could not be forsworn, that had to be fulfilled in its own time. And the time was come. Next day was Sunday. Like all Sundays past, since she had been a visitor to this house, the carriage came to take us both to church. The day was fine and warm. It was full of summer. She wore a new dark gown of thin, light stuff and a straw bonnet and carried a parasol. She smiled good morning at Wellington and at Jim, and I helped her into the carriage. When I took my seat beside her and we drove off through the park, she put her hand in mine. I held it many times in love before, felt the small size of it, turned the rings upon the fingers, seen the blue veins upon the back, touched the small, close-filed nails. Now, as it rested in my hand, I saw it, for the first time, put to another purpose. I saw it take the laburnum pods in deft fashion and empty out the seeds, then crush the seeds, and then rub them in her palm. I remembered once I had told her that her hands were beautiful, and she had answered with a laugh that I was the first to tell her so. "They have their issues," she said. "Ambrose used to say when I was gardening that they were workmen's hands." Now we had come to the steep hill, and the drag was put upon the rear wheel of the carriage. She touched my shoulder with her shoulder, and putting up her parasol against the sun, she said to me, "I slept so sound last night, I never heard you go." And she looked at me and smiled. Though she had deceived me for so long, I felt the greater liar. I could not even answer her, but to keep up the lie, held her hand the firmer and turned away my head. The sands were golden in the westward bay, the tide far out, the water sparkling in the sun. We turned along the lane that led to the village and to the church. The bells were ringing out across the air, and the people stood around the gate and waited for us to alight from the carriage and pass in before them. Rachel smiled and bowed to all of them. We saw the Kendalls and the Pascoes and the many tenants from the estate, and we walked up the aisle to our new pew as the organ played. We knelt in prayer for a brief moment, our faces buried in our hands. And what, I thought to myself, for I did not pray, is she saying to her God, if she acknowledges one? Does she give thanks for success in all she has achieved? Or does she ask for mercy? She rose from her knees and sat back on the cushioned seat, opening her prayer book. Her face was serene and happy. I wished that I could hate her, as I had hated her for many months unseen. Yet I could feel nothing now but this strange, terrible compassion. We stood up as the vicar entered, and the service began. I remember the psalm we sang upon that morning. "He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight." Her lips moved with the words. Her voice was soft and low as she sang. And when the vicar mounted the pulpit to preach his sermon, she folded her hands upon her lap and composed herself to listen, and her eyes, serious and intent, lifted to watch his face as he gave out his text. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. The sun came through the stained glass of the windows and shone upon her. I could see, from my seat, the round, rosy faces of the village children, yawning a little as they waited for the sermon to finish, and I could hear the shuffle of their feet, pinched into Sunday boots, longing to be barefoot on the green in play. I wished passionately, for one brief moment, that I might be young again and innocent, with Ambrose and not Rachel beside me in the pew. There is a green hill far away beneath a city wall. I don't know why we sang that hymn this day. Perhaps there had been some festival in connection with the village children. Our voices rose loud and clear in the parish church, and I did not think of Jerusalem, as I was no doubt supposed to do, but only of a plain grave in its corner of the Protestant cemetery in Florence. When the choir had departed and the congregation were stepping out into the aisles, Rachel whispered to me, "I believe we should ask the Kendalls and the Pascoes to dine today, as we used to do. It has been so long, and they will grow offended." I thought a moment, and then nodded briefly. It would be better so. Their company would help to bridge the gulf between us, and occupied in conversation with the guest, used to my silence on these occasions, she would have no time to look at me and wonder. Outside the church, the Pascals needed no persuasion, the Kendalls rather more. "I shall be obliged to leave you," said my godfather, "immediately we have dined, but the carriage can return again to fetch Louise." "Mr. Pascal has to preach again at evensong," interrupted the vicar's wife. "We can take you both back with us." They fell into elaborate plans of transportation, and while they were thus arguing and arranging how it could be best done, I noticed that the foreman in charge of the workmen, who were employed upon the building of the terrace walk and the future sunken garden, stood at the side of the path to speak to me, his hat in his hand. "What is it?" I said to him. "Excuse me, Mr. Ashley, sir. I looked for you yesterday when we were done work for the day, but did not see you. Just to warn you, if you should go on the terrace walk, not to stand on the bridgeway we are building across the sunken garden." "Why? What is wrong with it?" "It's only framework, sir, until we can get working on it Monday morning. The planking looks firm enough to the eye, but it doesn't bear no weight upon it. Anyone stepping on it, thinking to cross to the further side, could fall and break their neck." "Thank you," I said. "I will remember." I turned to find my party had come to their agreement, and as on that first Sunday, which now seemed so long ago, we split into 3 groups, Rachel and my godfather driving in his carriage, and Louise and I in mine. The Pascals in their brougham followed third. No doubt it had come about like this many times between, yet as we climbed the hill, and I got out and walked, I kept thinking of the first time, nearly 10 months before, on that Sunday in September. I had been irritated by Louise that morning, sitting so stiff and proud, and had neglected her from that day forward. She had not wavered, but had stayed my friend. When we topped the hill and I stepped once more into the carriage, I said to her, "Did you know that laburnum seeds are poisonous?" She looked at me, surprised. "Yes, I believe so," she said. "I know that if cattle eat them, they die, and children too. What makes you ask? Have you lost cattle at the Barton?" "No, not yet," I said, "but Tamlin spoke to me the other day about moving the trees that leaned from the plantation to the field beneath because of the seeds falling to the ground." "It might be wise to do so," she replied. "Father lost a horse once, years ago, eating yew berries. It could come about so quickly, and there is nothing one can do." We came along the lane and to the park gates, and I wondered what she would say if I told her of my discovery of the night before? Would she stare at me in horror, telling me I was mad? I doubted it. I thought she would believe me. This was not the place, though, with Wellington seated on the box and Jim beside him. I turned my head. The other carriages were following behind. "I want to talk to you, Louise," I said to her. "When your father leaves, after dinner, make some excuse to stay." She stared at me, a question in her eyes, but I said no more. Wellington pulled up before the house. I got out and gave Louise my hand. We stood waiting for the others. Yes, it might have been that other Sunday in September. Rachel was smiling now, as she smiled then. She was looking up at my godfather, talking as she did so, and I believe they were at politics again. That Sunday, though drawn towards her, she had been a stranger to me still, and now no part of her was strange. I knew the best. I knew the worst. Even the motives for all she did, baffling perhaps even to herself. I guessed them too. She had nothing for me now. Rachel, my torment. "This," she said, smiling as we all assembled in the hall, "is like old times again. I am so happy you have come." She embraced the party in a glance and led the way to the drawing room. The room, as always, looked its best in the summer. The windows were flung wide open and it was cool. The Japanese hortensias, feathery blue, stood long and slender in their vases and reflected in the mirrors on the wall. Outside, the sun beat down upon the lawns. It was very warm. A lazy bumblebee droned against one of the windows. The visitors sat down, languid and content to rest. Seacombe brought cake and wine. "You are all overcome because of a little sun," laughed Rachel. "To me, it is nothing. In Italy, we have it thus for 9 months in the year. I thrive upon it. Here, I will wait upon you all. Philip, remain seated. You are still my patient." She poured the wine into the glasses and brought it to us. My godfather and the vicar both stood up, protesting, but she waved them aside. When she came last to me, I was the only one who did not drink. "Not thirsty?" she said. I shook my head. I would take nothing from her hands again. She put the glass back upon the tray, and with her own went and sat beside Mrs. Pascoe and Louise upon the sofa. "I suppose," said the vicar, "that in Florence now the heat is well nigh unbearable, even to you?" "I never found it so," said Rachel. "The shutters would be closed early in the morning, which kept the villa cool throughout the day. We adapt ourselves to the climate. Anyone who stirs without in the middle of the day asks for disaster, so we stay within and sleep. I am lucky, at the Villa Sangalletti, in having a little court beside the house that faces north and never has the sun upon it. There is a pool there and a fountain, and when the air feels used, I turn on the fountain. The water dripping has a soothing sound. In the spring and summer, I never sit anywhere else." In spring, indeed, she could watch the buds upon the laburnum tree swell and turn to flower. And the flowers themselves, with drooping golden heads, make a canopy for the naked boy who stood above the pool, holding the shell between his hands. In their turn, the flowers would fade and fall. And when high summer came to the villa, as it had come here, in less intensity, the pods upon the branches of the tree would burst and scatter, and the green seeds tumble to the ground. All this she would have watched, sitting in the little court with Ambrose at her side. I would dearly love to visit Florence, said Mary Pascal, her eyes round and dreaming of God knew what strange magnificence. And Rachel turned to her and said, Then you must do so next year and come and stay with me. You must all come and stay with me in turn. At once we were in the midst of exclamations, questions, and expressions of dismay. Must she go soon? When would she return? What were her plans? She shook her head in answer. Presently I shall go, she said, and presently return. I act on impulse and will not confine myself to dates, nor would she be drawn into further detail. I saw my godfather glance at me out of the corner of his eye, then, tugging his mustache, stare at his feet. I could imagine the thought that was passing through his head. Once she has gone, he will be himself again. The afternoon wore on. At 4 we sat to dinner. Once more I was seated at the head of the table and Rachel at the foot, my godfather and the vicar on either end. Once more there was talk and laughter, even poetry. I sat, much with the same silence that I had at first, and watched her face. Then it had been with fascination, because unknown. The continuation of conversation, the change of topic, the inclusion of each person at the table was something that I had never seen a woman do, so it was magic. Now I knew all the tricks. The starting of a subject, the whisper behind her hand to the vicar, and the laughter of both followed at once by my godfather leaning forward, asking, Now what was that, Mrs. Ashley? What did you say? And her immediate reply, quick and mocking, The vicar will inform you. With the vicar blushing red and proud, thinking himself a wit, embarking on a story that his family had not heard. It was a little game that she enjoyed. And we were all of us, with our dull Cornish ways, so easy to handle and to fool. I wondered if in Italy her task was harder. I did not think so. Only her company there was more suited to her mettle. And with Rinaldi at her hand to help her, speaking the language she knew best, the talk would sparkle at the Villa Sangaletti with greater brilliance than it had ever done at my dull table. Sometimes she gestured with her hands as though to clarify her rapid speech. When she talked to Rinaldi in Italian, I had noticed she did it even more. Today, interrupting my godfather in some statement, she did it once again. Both hands, so quick and deft, brushing aside the air. Then, waiting for his answer, her elbows resting lightly on the table, the hands folded themselves, were still. Her head was turned to him as she listened, so that from the head of the table where I sat, I looked on her in profile. She was always a stranger thus. The neat, clipped features on a coin, dark and withdrawn, a foreign woman standing in a doorway, a shawl about her head, her hand outstretched. But full face, when she smiled, a stranger, never, the Rachel that I knew, that I had loved. My godfather finished his story. There was a pause and silence. Trained now to all her movements, I watched her eyes. They looked to Mrs. Pascal, then to me. Shall we go into the garden, she said. We all rose from our chairs, and the vicar, pulling out his watch, sighed and observed. Much as I regretted, I must tear myself away. I, too, remarked my godfather. I have a brother sick at Luxeuillan and promised to call and see him. But Louise may stay. Surely you have time to drink your tea, said Rachel. But it seemed the hour was later than we had thought, and at length, after some pother, Nick Kendall and the Pascals departed in the brougham. Louise alone remained. Since there are only the three of us, said Rachel, let us be informal. Come to the boudoir. And smiling at Louise, she led the way upstairs. Louise shall drink tisana, she called over her shoulder. I will show her my method. When her father suffers from insomnia, if ever, this is the remedy. We all came to the boudoir and sat down. I by the open window, Louise upon the stool. Rachel busied herself with her preparations. The English way, said Rachel, if there can be an English way, which I rather doubt, is to take peeled barley. I brought my own dried herbs from Florence. If you like the taste, I will leave some with you when I go. Louise rose from the stool and stood beside her. I heard from Mary Pascal that you know the name of every herb, she said, and have doctored the tenants here on the estate for many ailments. In old days, the people knew more about these things than they do now. Yet some of the old folk can still charm away warts and rashes. I can charm more than warts, laughed Rachel. Call in at their cottages and ask them. Herb lore is very ancient. I learned it from my mother. Thank you, John. John had brought up the kettle of steaming water. In Florence, said Rachel, I used to brew the tisana in my room and let it stand. It is better thus. Then we would go out into the court and sit, and I would turn on the fountain, and while we sipped our tisana, the water dripped into the pool. Ambrose would sit there, watching it for hours. She poured the water that John had brought into the teapot. I have a mind, she said, to bring back from Florence, next time I come to Cornwall, a little statue like the one above my pool. It will take some finding, but I shall be successful in the end. Then we can put him to stand in the middle of the new sunken garden we are building here, and make a fountain too. What do you think? She turned to me, smiling, and she was stirring the tisana with a spoon in her left hand. If you like, I answered. Philip lacks all enthusiasm, she said to Louise. Either he agrees to all I say or does not care. Sometimes I think my labors here are wasted. The terrace walk, the shrubs in the plantation. He would have been content with rough grass and a muddied path. Here, take your cup. She gave the cup to Louise, who had sat down on the stool. Then she brought me mine, where I was sitting on the windowsill. I shook my head. No tisana, Philip, she said. But it is good for you and makes you sleep. You have never refused before. This is a special brew. I have made it double strength. You drink it for me, I replied. She shrugged her shoulders. Mine is already poured. I like it to stand longer. This must be wasted. What a pity. She leaned over me and poured it from the window. Drawing back, she put her hand on my shoulder, and from her came the scent I knew so well. No perfume, but the essence of her own person, the texture of her skin. Are you not well? She whispered so that Louise could not hear. If all knowledge and all feeling could be blotted out, I would have asked it then, and that she should remain, her hand upon my shoulder. No letter torn to shreds, no secret packet locked in a little drawer, no evil, no duplicity. Her hand moved from my shoulder to my chin and stayed there for a moment in a brief caress, which, because she stood between me and Louise, passed unseen. My sullen one, she said. I looked above her head and saw the portrait of Ambrose above the mantelpiece. His eyes stared straight into mine, in youth and innocence. I answered nothing, and moving from me, she put back my empty cup onto the tray. What do you think of it? She asked Louise. I am afraid, apologized Louise, that it would take me a little time to like it well. Perhaps, said Rachel. The musty flavor does not suit all persons. Never mind. It is a sedative to unquiet minds. Tonight we shall all sleep well. She smiled and drank slowly from her own cup. We chatted a little while, for perhaps half an hour or more, or rather she did with Louise. Then rising and putting back her cup upon the tray, she said, "Now it is cooler. Who will walk with me in the garden?" I glanced across at Louise, who, looking at me, stayed silent. "I have promised Louise," I said, to show her an old plan of the Pellin estate that I came across the other day. The boundaries are strongly marked and show the old hill fortress being part of it. "Very well," said Rachel. "Take her to the drawing room or remain here as you please. I shall take my walk alone." She went, humming a song, into the blue bedroom. "Stay where you are," I said softly to Louise. I went downstairs and to the office, for in truth there was an old plan that I had somewhere among my papers. I found it in a file and went back across the court. As I came to the side door that led from near the drawing room to the garden, Rachel was setting forth upon her walk. She wore no hat, but had her sunshade open in her hand. "I shall not be long," she said. "I'm going up to the terrace. I want to see if a little statue would work well in the sunken garden." "Have a care," I said to her. "Why? Of what?" she asked. She stood beside me, her sunshade resting on her shoulder. She wore a dark gown of some thin muslin stuff with white lace about the neck. She looked much as I had seen her first 10 months ago, except that it was summer. The scent of the new cut grass was in the air. A butterfly flew past in happy flight. The pigeons cooed from the great trees beyond the lawn. "Have a care," I said slowly, "of walking beneath the sun." She laughed and went from me. I watched her cross the lawn and climb the steps towards the terrace. I turned back into the house, and going swiftly up the stairs came to the boudoir. Louise was waiting there. "I want your help," I said briefly. "I have little time to lose." She rose from the stool, her eyes a question. "What is it?" "You remember the conversation that we had those weeks ago in the church?" I said to her. She nodded. "Well, you were right, and I was wrong," I answered. "But never mind that now. I have suspicions of worse beside, but I must have final proof. I think she has tried to poison me, and that she did the same to Ambrose." Louise said nothing. Her eyes widened in horror. "It does not matter now how I discovered it," I said, "but the clue may lie in a letter from that man Rinaldi. I am going to search her bureau here to find it. You learned a smattering of Italian with your French. Between us, we can reach some translation." Already I was looking through the bureau, more thoroughly than I was able to do the night before the candlelight. "Why did you not warn my father?" said Louise. "If she is guilty, he could accuse her with greater force than you." "I must have proof," I answered her. Here were papers, envelopes stacked neatly in a pile. Here were receipts and bills that might have alarmed my godfather had he seen them, but meant little to me, in my fever to discover what I sought. I tried again the little drawer that held the packet. This time it was not locked. I pulled it open, and the drawer was empty. The envelope had gone. This might be an added proof, but my tisana had been poured away. I went on opening the drawers, and Louise stood beside me, her brows knit with anxiety. "You should have waited," she said. "It is not wise. You should have waited for my father, who could take legal action. What you are doing now is what anyone might do, a common thief." Life and death, I said. Do not wait for legal action. Here, what is this? I tossed her a long paper with names upon it, some of them in English, some Latin, some Italian. I am not sure, she answered, but I think it is a list of plants and herbs. The writing is not clear. She puzzled over it as I turned out the drawers. Yes, she said, this must be her herbs and remedies. But the second sheet is in English and would seem to be notes on the propagation of plants, species after species, dozens of them. Look for laburnum, I said. Her eyes held mine an instant in sudden understanding. Then she looked down once more to the page she held in her hands. Yes, it is here, she said, but it tells you nothing. I tore it from her hands and read, where her finger pointed. Laburnum satistus, a native of South Europe. These plants are capable of being increased by seeds, and many of them by cutting and layers. In the first mode, the seeds should be sown, either in beds or where the plants are to remain. In spring, as about March, and when of sufficient growth, transplant it into nursery rows, to remain till of a proper size for being planted in the situations where they are to grow. Beneath was an added note of the source from where she had taken the information. The New Botanic Garden, printed for John Stockdale and Company by T. Bowsley, Bold Court, Fleet Street, 1812. There is nothing here about poison, said Louise. I continued searching the desk. I found a letter from the bank. I recognized the handwriting of Mr. Couch. Ruthless and careless now, I opened it. Dear Madam, we thank you for your return of the Ashley collection of the jewels, which, according to your instruction, as you are shortly to leave the country, will remain with us in custody until such time as your heir, Mr. Philip Ashley, may take possession of them. Yours faithfully, Herbert Couch. I put the letter back in sudden anguish. Whatever Rinaldi's influence, some impulse of her own directed this action. There was nothing else of any matter. I had searched thoroughly each drawer, raked every pigeonhole. Either she had destroyed the letter or carried it upon her. Baffled, frustrated, I turned again to Louise. It is not here, I said. Have you looked through the blotter? She asked in doubt. Like a fool, I had laid it on the chair, never thinking that so obvious a place could hide a secret letter. I took it up, and there, in the center, between two clean white sheets, fell out the envelope from Plymouth. The letter was still inside. I pulled it from its cover and gave it to Louise. This is it, I said. See if you can decipher it. She looked down at the piece of paper, then gave it back to me. But it isn't in Italian, she said to me. Read it yourself. I read the note. There were only a few brief lines. He had dispensed with formality as I had thought he might, but not in the manner I had pictured. The time was 11 of the evening, but there was no beginning. Since you have become more English than Italian, I write to you in your language of adoption. It is after 11, and we weigh anchor at midnight. I will do all you ask of me in Florence, and perhaps more beside, though I am not sure you deserve any of it. At least the villa will be waiting for you, and the servants, when you at last decide to tear yourself away. Do not delay too long. I have never had great faith in those impulses of your heart and your emotions. If, in the end, you cannot bring yourself to leave that boy behind, then bring him with you. I warn you, though, against my better judgment. Have a care to yourself and believe me, your friend, Rinaldi. I read it once, then twice. I gave it to Louise. Does it give you the proof you wanted? She asked. No, I said. Something must be missing, some postscript on a further scrap of paper that she had thrust into another sheet of the blotter. I looked once more, but there was nothing. The blotter was clean, save for one folded packet lying on the top. I seized it and tore away the wrapping. This time, it was not a letter, nor a list of herbs or plants. It was a drawing of Ambrose. The initials in the corner were indistinct, but I supposed it was by some Italian friend or artist, for Florence was scribbled after the initials, and the date was the month of June, of the year he died. As I stared at it, I realized it must be the last likeness ever taken. He had aged much then after leaving home. There were lines about his mouth. I did not know, and at the corners of his eyes. The eyes themselves had a haunted look about them, as though some shadow stood close to his shoulder and he feared to look behind. There was something lost about the face, and lonely too. He seemed to know disaster was in store. Though the eyes asked for devotion, they pleaded for pity too. Underneath the drawing, Ambrose himself had scribbled some quotation in Italian. To Rachel, non rematare che le ore felici. Ambrose. Which means in English, remember only the happy hours. I gave the drawing to Louise. There is only this, I said. What does it mean? She read the words aloud, then thought a moment. Remember only the happy hours, she said slowly. She gave it back to me, and the letter from Rinaldi too. Did she not show it to you before? She asked. No, I answered. We looked at one another in silence for a moment. Then Louise said, Can we have misjudged her, do you think? About the poison. You see yourself, there is not any proof. There never will be any proof, I said. Not now. Not ever. I put the drawing back upon the bureau, and the letter too. If there is no proof, said Louise, you cannot condemn her. She may be innocent. She may be guilty. You can do nothing. If she be innocent and you accused her, you could never forgive yourself. You would be guilty then, not her at all. Let's leave this room and go down into the drawing room. I wish now we had not meddled with her things. I stood by the open window of the boudoir staring out across the lawn. Is she there? Asked Louise. No, I said. She has been gone nearly half an hour and has not returned. Louise crossed the room and stood by my side. She looked into my face. Why is your voice so strange? She said. Why do you keep your eyes fixed there on those steps leading to the terrace walk? Is anything the matter? I brushed her aside and went towards the door. Do you know the bell rope on the landing beneath the belfry? I said to her. The one that is used at noon to summon the men to dinner. Go now and pull it hard. She looked at me puzzled. What for? She asked. Because it is Sunday, I said, and everyone is out or sleeping or scattered somewhere, and I may need help. Help, she repeated. Yes, I said. There may have been an accident. To Rachel. Louise stared at me. Her eyes, so blue and candid, searched my face. What have you done? She said, and apprehension came upon her, conviction too. I turned and left the room. I ran downstairs and across the lawn and up the path to the terrace walk. There was no sign of Rachel. Near to the stones and mortar and the stack of timber above the sunken garden, the two dogs were standing. One of them, the younger, came towards me. The other stayed where he was, close to the heap of mortar. I saw her footsteps in the sand and lime, and her sunshade, still open, tipped upon its side. Suddenly the bell rang out from the clock tower on the house. It went on, and the day being still and calm, the sound of it must have traveled across the field down to the sea, so that the men fishing in the bay would have heard it too. I came to the edge of the wall above the sunken garden and saw where the men had started work upon the bridge. Part of the bridge still remained and hung suspended, grotesque and horrible, like a swinging ladder. The rest had fallen to the depths below. I climbed down to where she lay among the timber and the stones. I took her hands and held them. They were cold. "Rachel," I said to her. And "Rachel," once again. The dogs began barking up above, and louder still came the sound of the clanging bell. She opened her eyes and looked at me. At first, I think in pain, then in bewilderment, then finally, so I thought, in recognition. Yet I was in error even then. She called me Ambrose. I went on holding her hands until she died. They used to hang men at 4 turnings in the old days. Not anymore, though. The end. I am sorry. After reading that line, "She called me Ambrose," I went quiet for a moment. I don't know, for more than a moment. I don't know why I didn't just hit the pause button, because everything was choked up in my throat. And I could have saw the next line, that he went on holding her hands until she died. I never saw this coming. Never. And I'm going to just give you my thoughts at the top of my head, and then probably take a pause, finish my coffee. I think that this is why Daphne du Maurier endures. Would I say she gave us certainty? I think she gives us not just ambiguity, but obsession. And in the end of this chapter, and something that I've been saying for the last few chapters, that the reason why I don't think that she gives us certainty is because she wants us to look at ourselves, and she gives us human blindness in this last chapter. Oh my God. So many things were running through my head, but I was not rushing, but I was like, oh my God, it's so quiet. Because usually my neighbor, my landlady lives upstairs, and she has like 5 dogs, and they're all barking crazy. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm so blessed. It's so quiet right now. So I didn't want to get my pad and pen out and start stopping to write things down. I didn't have that luxury like I do when I'm at home. But we have this human blindness, and the terrible cost of suspicion once it takes root. And I've been saying that first chapter. Oh, Daphne is, I'm just remembering Rebecca. That first chapter of the hanging man, like, you know that's a foreshadowing. Like, where is it going to play out at? And it plays out in the last line. The last line, so much like Rebecca. Last night I dreamt again that I was in Manderley. And it ends that way. She's so good. Philip knows deep down. He knows. Not legally or factually, not with proof, but spiritually, morally, emotionally. He knows one thing for sure, and we know it too. He killed her. Not by pushing her, and not by laying hands on her, but he withheld the warning. that have care that he says to her as he sees her going out for her walk was not a warning at all. When she said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Have care with the son." You know, it wasn't a warning. It was almost like a sentence. And I think the devastating part is this, like right up to the end, right up till the very end. And I love that we have Louise here in the end. Daphne still refuses to tell us plainly whether Rachel was innocent or guilty. Even the Tisana remains uncertain. The herbs remain uncertain. Ambrose remains uncertain. Was she manipulative? Maybe. Did she enjoy admiration and the emotional influence that she had over Philip? Yes. But what do we know of the poison? What do we know of murder? We never truly know. And that, I thought, was an awakening in Philip, right? The chapter starts out. I thought it was an awakening, but was it just paranoia fully blooming? Every gesture becomes evidence. Every smile that she gave, every gesture that she had was evidence that she's poisoning me. Every smile was deceitful. Every memory that he had of her became corrupted. And we see that because he begins studying her movements. You know, her hand is not the same anymore. Her face, you know, when she talks and she's in profile, the way that she laughs, the way that she speaks, the intimacy that he felt for her turned monstrous. The very things he once adored about her became proof to him. And that transformation is so horrifying because it is so human. And du Maurier has a way of giving us something brilliant, but also cruel, because she places the truth almost entirely out of reach and replaces it with certainty. She replaces the certainty with consequence. The Rinaldi letter, did that change everything? I think the jewels changed everything from Mr. Couch. She handed them back to the bank for safekeeping, and on the time of her death, they'd be returned back to her heir, Philip. But the Rinaldi letter changes everything. When you finally know what Rinaldi said to her, the conversations that we conjured up in our mind all change. You can't pull yourself away from this kid. You've adopted English now. You're not even Italian anymore, so I'll speak to you in English. I'll go back and do what you asked me to do at the villa, even though you don't deserve it. It's 11 p.m. and we're dropping anchor at midnight. And if you can't bear to tear yourself away from this boy, well then, for God's sake, take him with you. Oh. Was that enough to change what we thought was the conversation between Rinaldi and Rachel? Maybe not completely, but maybe enough. Enough to suggest Rachel may have truly, I think we always knew that she intended to leave, but enough to suggest Ambrose may have misunderstood her too. Enough to suggest Philip may have inherited not only Ambrose's estate, but Ambrose's obsession and jealousy and possessiveness and fear. Because Was Ambrose ever really in love too? These two men? Have they been in love for the first time with the same woman? And when Rachel called him Ambrose as she dies, I mean, I couldn't read the next line. I couldn't even bring my hand to the pause button. That shattered me too. Because I think in that moment, Philip realizes he became the very man he thought he was avenging. And I love that you can feel the gothic tragedy fully land there. The cycle repeating himself. The dogs guarding her reminded me of the dogs and reminded me of Don. Oh, there's so much to think about in this chapter. I have to go back and highlight it. Highlight things for discussion. The broken bridge suspended so grotesquely as the bell is ringing, as her sunshade, her umbrella is lying open. You know, this scene of him coming upon it, her footsteps there and then disappearing. The sunshade is on its side lying open, and the grotesque image of the suspended bridge half there. It almost feels like shock, like dreamlike, and medieval, like a cursed fable. And then we have the final sentence that lands like judgment, and not from like Louise was begging him, go to my father, you know, and he's like, life or death, don't have time for the law. So the judgment came not from the courts, not from society, but again, we're trapped in Philip's mind. It comes from Philip's conscience. And I think what makes this ending extraordinary is that the mystery is never solved. Only the damage is. And honestly, I think that is why people still talk about Rebecca. We had resolution with Rebecca, though. People still talk about Rebecca, though, and they talk about my cousin Rachel decades later, because certainty and uncertainty are great topics psychologically. And Daphne understood that uncertainty can haunt people longer than truth ever can or could. I am so happy that you, my audience, came on this beautiful journey through this book, truly. And now I'm going to sit here with my Kindle and I'm going to highlight a few things that I thought maybe this, but now when I was reading, I'm thinking maybe that. And I'm going to even script a couple of questions for you guys. I think I finally understand why Daphne du Maurier opened the story with the image of the hanging man at the four turnings. Remember Tom Jenkins? He was drunk and he went home. His wife was a scold, said Ambrose, but that was no reason to kill her. And so I wanted to go back into my Kindle and read again, because this is the first time that we meet Philip and Ambrose, right? This is the first page. They used to hang men at four turnings in the old days, is the first line, just like last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. You know, it ends her beginning sentence and ending sentence. I guess that's a little clue into the mind of Daphne du Maurier. Not anymore, though. That is the first sentence of the book. And so I thought, let me go back and, you know, he's hanging from a gibbet. That, remember, that's that little hangman. And he's been there for 5 weeks. And Ambrose is poking him with a stick. And he says that he swung from the gibbet between heaven and earth. Betwixt heaven and hell, that's what Ambrose said. Heaven he would never achieve, and the hell he had known was lost to him. And Ambrose is telling him, this is where Philip says, Ambrose must have taken me there for a purpose, perhaps to test my nerve, to see if I would run away or laugh or cry, as my guardian, father, brother, counselor, and as in fact my whole world. He was forever testing me. We walked around the gibbet. I remember, with Ambrose prodding and poking with his stick, and then he paused and lit his pipe. There you are, Philip, he said. It's what we all come to in the end. Some upon a battlefield, some in bed, others according to their destiny. There is no escape. You cannot learn this lesson too young. This is how a felon dies. A warning to you and me to lead a sober life. Here is Tom Jenkin, honest and dull, except when he drank too much. It's true his wife was a scold, but that was no excuse to kill her. If we killed women for their tongues, all men would be murderers. And then he remembers that, this is Tom Jenkins, who used to, sell live lobsters along the quay, and he would race them to make the children laugh. And Ambrose asks him, what do you make of him? And that Philip just shrugs his shoulders, and he kicked the base of the gibbet with his foot. Ambrose must never know I cared, that I felt sick at heart and terrified he would despise me. Ambrose at 27 was God of all creation, certainly God of my own narrow world, and the whole object of my life was to resemble him. And so he says to Ambrose, well, he had a brighter face when I saw him last. Now he isn't as fresh enough to become bait for his own lobsters. And Ambrose laughs, and he's like, you're a true philosopher, that's my boy. If you feel squeamish, though, go behind the hedge and get sick. And so this, haunted Philip his whole life. About, here come the dogs. Let me pause here a second until they stop. That story of Tom Jenkins, at first it feels like one of those old, dark stories that, get whispered, down generated. There was this man, Tom Jenkins, and in the book, it's like maybe to create atmosphere. I find it very telling that that's how we meet Ambrose and Philip for the first time. But it's not just a story. It was judgment. It was guilt. It was, of course, as I've been saying, foreshadowing. But what was the foreshadowing? I kept saying that through every chapter. When are we going to get back to why she opened the book here at where the four roads meet, the four turnings? I could have not predicted Rachel's death. I thought yesterday when we were talking, the pre-conversation to the chapter, the final chapter, I thought Philip was going to die. But this is a foreshadowing of Philip's consciousness. Because whether or not Rachel was innocent or guilty, Philip will hang there emotionally for the rest of his life. Betwixt, like Ambrose said, Tom was between heaven and hell. Philip will be suspended between love and suspicion, devotion and fear, and what was the truth, and what was imagination. I never saw this coming in the end, but it's brilliant. When Rachel called him Ambrose, I stopped reading. As I said earlier, there was this long silence because suddenly the entire novel shifted between my feet. In that one moment, I think Philip realized, as I think fear does, Philip realizes he has become the very shadow he thought he was fighting against. I think fear does that. I think your mind has to, in a way, create the narrative so that this invested belief that you have
wasn't a waste of time, you know. Look, how many of us fear things, anxiety, panic, and we fear so much the thing happening that we actually put ourselves in that state of panic. And it happens again and again, but it really didn't. It is the creation of our own mind. We create the story when it comes to panic and anxiety. We're creating, and our mind is just repeating what it knows. But again, what don't we know? We don't really know if the tea was poisoned. Did she just make him a stronger tea? What was it stronger because she truly believed that it would help him sleep, help them all sleep? She's putting everybody, to bed, I think that she did manipulate emotions. I think that she, without question, loved to be admired. But again, like I said, I don't know that she was a murderess. And then the jewels. She returns them to the bank. Like he was showering her with everything because he believed this is what you want. You want the estate, you want the money, give her more. Don't just give her an allowance. Give her the jewels. She would have given them, she would have inherited them anyway. And I think the fact that she left them behind until Philip Ashley can inherit them, it changes something. It doesn't change everything, but it does change something very important. And I think that's why the ending hurts so much, because the mystery is never fully solved. Only the tragedy is. And I started this book with a canvas with the flowers, and I had said earlier, like when I was diamond painting her face, that I kept thinking about the emotions behind a face. But this canvas kind of worked its way into this story, and it just feels so appropriate. A Sacred Heart is not just about love. It's about suffering through love, about devotion, whether you're looking at it emotionally, physically, spiritually. I, as a Catholic, the Sacred Heart means all that to me. It means devotion, love, an unwavering faith in my belief. And it is mixed with pain and sacrifice and longing and misunderstanding and grief. We go through all those emotions, and that is exactly what this novel became. I think that I am mentally and physically exhausted. I got up early this morning to read this to you all so that I can get it uploaded. So we need to have a discussion on this book. So I'm going to ask you what you believe. Do you believe Rachel poisoned Ambrose? Do you believe she poisoned Philip? Do you think that Philip was protecting himself? Or was he surrendering to his paranoia? Because it can become exhausting. It is like panic and anxiety. Panic and anxiety become exhausting. And you're so busy fighting it off, that at one point you might just surrender to it. So was he trying to protect himself, or was he surrendering to his paranoia because he's just exhausted? He doesn't know. We don't know. He's living it, or was he living it in his mind? And did Rachel truly love Philip in her own way? We have this, kind of exhausted letter from Rinaldi, like, listen, you're impulsive. You have this, but I think Italians are, you know what I mean? We're passionate people. We're passionate, like we hold a baby and we want to just squeeze and bite their little cheeks, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're so, passionate with our love. We want to take a bite out of it, I think that she was a passionate soul. And maybe for as much as she wanted to or needed to be taken care of, that free spirit of her didn't want to be beholden. Women at that time really weren't. Look at Louise. Is she regarded as being independent and individual and truly in charge of her own mind? Philip says she gets this from her father, like she's just being a parrot. No, she's intelligent. So women at that time really were not looked at as being, even though they had a great deal of work to do, they weren't retreating to the Rose and Crown after a long day of laundry and pounding bread and raising babies to go get an owl, and a broiled salmon. So did Rachel truly love Philip in her own way, this passionate way that she had of abandoning everything in her life? I can relate to that in some way. I drive John nuts. He's a planner. He drives me nuts. Yesterday we went to the beach. We went to go see the air show. And he is trying to control the wind and the sand. And I'm like, just leave it. No one is laying on the blanket anyway. Just fold it up. Why does it have to be laid out? There's sand all over it. The wind is blowing. And so he goes to pick it up. And what does he do? He picks it up and all the sand goes right in my face, eyes, and mouth. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I got to go. I can't be around this. So I am the free spirit. I drive him nuts. He'll be like, what are you going to do today? Like, we're at the shore. We're here, and he will be like, what's your plan for today? I'm like, I'm just going to let the day unfold. I've been saying this for 5 years. He knows that that's my stock answer. I'm going to let the day unfold. What do you have on your list? Because I know he's got a checklist. And he will not rest until he gets this checklist done. That's my husband. We're two different things. So in a way I can see where Rachel is just and I think that this is the way that I am also. She's just living life, and life has its twists and turns. And what's the sense of making plans anyway? My grandmother instilled that in my head. She used to always say, God willing. Oh, you're going to be at the barbecue next week? God willing. I can make plans, but God has other ones for me. That's instilled in me. And I think maybe Rachel planned her day in a way to do the things that she loved, like I planned to do my diamond painting. But I know that the life might twist and turn, and I might have other things to do that I enjoy doing, or other things that might happen, or I might at the spur of the moment decide. Like yesterday, going to the air show. He's like, I'm going to go down to the beach. The air show is starting at noon, and I'm going to be there, right? And I'm just like, oh, okay. He's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'll meet you there. Oh, are you coming at noon? I'm like, I don't know. Whenever I get done my diamond painting, because I have to get this done first before I read to you guys. Oh, okay. And like, I just move at my own pace. I don't have to be there exactly at noon. But if I wanted to be there, I would. Does that make sense? And what other questions did I want to ask you? Why do you think she called him Ambrose at the very end? That little portrait of him, that little sketch, is haunting me, that it was tucked there. Did he have it drawn by an artist because it was done in Florence? And even the way that it was described, the portrait was done the year that he died, and Philip says it was the last likeness of him, that he had aged much, that there were lines about his mouth that he never knew, and at the corner of his eyes, and that the eyes had a haunted look about them, as though some shadow stood close to his shoulder, and he feared to look behind. This is again, we're in Philip's mind. There was something lost about the face, and lonely too. He seemed to know disaster was in store. Though the eyes asked for devotion, they pleaded for pity too. Underneath the drawing was the quote that in Italian, he wrote to her in Italian. Remember only the happy hours. And she never showed that to him. So that was something very personal to her. I can't say if she really loved Ambrose, because we don't have any words from her. We only have what Philip is deciphering as devotion. So why do you think that she called him Ambrose at the very end? And the broken bridge, an accident or fate? I couldn't help but remember the bad seed, and I won't say, if you read that one with me, that to me was fate. And I have one big question. Maybe you have a big question of your own, and I would love to hear it. Who is truly responsible for the tragedy of this story? I thought about it. I honestly don't think there is a simple answer. Who is responsible for the tragedy of this story? When we think of the story and it ends in tragedy, the love and marriage between Rachel and Ambrose ended in tragedy, and this ends in tragedy. Her now not even in never going back to Florence, never going back to Florence, never going back to the Villa Sangalletti, never seeing Rinaldi again, ends in tragedy. And maybe that's why my cousin Rachel continues to haunt readers decades later. I love it. I love it. I think we need a little bit of time to think about it, to really let it anchor in our system. I need to pencil in alive. Because my plans are up in the air all the time. So be on the lookout for Alive. And again, thank you all for taking this journey with me. I love reading, and I love reading aloud, and I love reading to you guys. And I love that this channel incorporates so many different things. Is today Saturday? Tomorrow's Self-Care Sunday. Maybe we can do a topic close to this book. But again, thank you for listening and discussing and theorizing and grieving and feeling every page alongside of me. These stories become so much richer when you have people that read along with you or listen along with you, and you share them together. And I hope, however you spend the rest of this day, whether it's quietly painting or whatever it is, I would like to think of you sitting with everything Daphne du Maurier has left behind in our hearts. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Have a good evening, day, weekend, everyone. I will see you tomorrow for Self-Care Sunday. And of course, there's like 10 minutes left, so why not have a little music if you're still diamond painting or falling asleep or whatever it is that you're doing. Bye, everyone. Thank you again. I really, really, really enjoyed this book and looking forward to our time together discussing it. Bye.